Hi, this is Doug Ward from Tech Britain. I'm at White Bear Yard in London with one of the partners in Passion Capital, Robert Dighero. Thanks for your time, Robert.
Doug, thank you.
It's nice to meet you.
Yep, good to meet you.
Robert, can we talk about your background to start with, please?
Sure. Started out as an engineer, actually, engineering degrees. Worked in consulting for a couple of years. Would you believe a couple of years in marketing? Then found myself in a business school in INSEAD in France, and then following that I ended up in New York working for a German media group called Bertelsmann, and that was just the start of the dot-com boom in '95 in the US, or the start of new media really. During that time Bertelsmann did a deal with an unknown company called America Online in the US to launch online services in Europe. So I found myself in '95 coming back to Europe, and we launched AOL. And at that point I was the finance director for AOL for the launch in Europe. And that business did amazingly well, obviously hit the market at the right time. A couple of years later I joined a startup called QXL, which was effectively an eBay type business, although it actually copied a different model originally called On Sale, which was another US auction business. And then I went through a whole roller coaster ride with QXL, which went through the dot-com boom in Europe. We had our highs and we had our lows, and then 10 years later, after many sleepless nights and long days, the company was sold for a very nice sum, for a couple of $1 billion, and that was in 2008. And then I started angel investing. I met back up with Stefan, one of my partners here now at Passion Capital, and he had the idea for a fund. And the following year we launched White Bear Yard with Eileen, the third partner, and in 2011, we launched Passion Capital Fund, which is a UK fund supported by the government, by Capital for Enterprise. So it's a Capital for Enterprise fund, which is 2/3 of the money comes from the UK government and 1/3 from private individuals. So that's me now.
Fantastic. Speaking about White Bear Yard, what is White Bear Yard, Robert?
So White Bear Yard and Passion Capital sort of sit next to each other, so they're separate in terms of legal entities and funding and everything. White Bear Yard is a space in Clerkenwell in London, so just on the edge of the sort of Silicon Roundabout sort of tech city. It's 7,000 square feet, just over. We have about a dozen companies in here normally, with a pretty high throughput of companies. Now some of those companies are Passion Capital investees, but many of them are not. So it will just depend on the time, whether or not we have a particular investor who wants to be here. But if we move companies through pretty quickly, so as companies grow up, obviously they get to a certain size and they no longer want to be desk renting, they want their own office. They'll move on, and then we'll have new companies come in and start. And of course, unfortunately, sometimes companies get smaller and then they will disappear too. But a company typically will be here for about 12 months. That would probably be normal.
And is there a criteria to be able to get into the space?
Well, we do give priority to Passion Capital companies, so that would be first. And then normally it's a recommendation or someone we've met. Less usual for a company who we just don't know at all to be here, to be fair. So it's I wouldn't say it's selective, but it's definitely people we know, people who've been recommended to us, if not one of our investees.
And your thoughts on the local tech community, Robert? Where do you think London's at today?
I think London's at the start of a very long process. So I think it's doing many of the right things. I think building up what people would call us. You hear the word ecosystem all the time. But building up that ecosystem is not going to happen in 1, 2, or 3 years. It's 5, 10, maybe 20. To really build up the density that we see in Silicon Valley. That's not going to happen overnight. So I think we're on the right path, but I think it's still very early days.
In terms of White Bear Yard, what was the thought process to set White Bear Yard up?
So originally, we really thought about it as somewhere that would support the fund, because the Passion Capital is a seed investment fund. We make a large number of investments early on, and it's quite difficult to be involved in and manage a large number of investments. Most VCs will restrict the number of investments per partner to maybe 8 or 9 or 10 or something like this. And we'd always planned to have more than that. So having a space where we could interact with the companies easily, we thought would always allow us to invest in effectively more companies and let's say I wanted to have a board meeting, I don't have to get on a train to, for example, Manchester, and my whole day is gone. I can, wander around. I can meet 3 or 4 companies in the space of an hour. It can be very quick from our perspective. What's happened, of course, is we've seen a lot of additional benefits that we weren't necessarily planning. So obviously the teams benefit a lot from interacting with each other. We get a lot of very interesting deal flow coming into the fund because people are coming in all the time, meeting other people. So it works well as a space. And also, it allows us to just interact with the companies more and just get the feel for them, which I think we wouldn't have if they were sitting in our offices elsewhere. So we get a very strong sense of which of our companies, if they are investees, because not all of them are, which of our companies are doing well and which of them are, not necessarily doing so well, just from being in the same office.
Fair enough, yeah. In terms of the plans for the future with Passion Capital, do you have plans to look outside the UK, or are you maybe a different branch outside of London?
Well, Passion Capital is, because it's government money, or partly government money, we obviously have a UK focus. So,
Okay.
we do attempt to bring companies into the UK. That's one of our we very much part of our mandates to bring, attract talent into London, and we see that also the government's very keen on that with their entrepreneurial visa programs and things. So we do reach out to other countries, but fundamentally we are trying to build up a UK ecosystem. That's core to our proposition. So I would say Passion Capital is largely a UK-focused fund. If we did another fund at later dates, then possibly we could do that, but not within Passion Capital today.
Fair enough, yeah. And in terms of the government's role in the tech community, Robert, what do you think is their best role to play?
I mean, it's always a tricky one. It's a balance between being involved, which I think everyone wants them to be, and not meddling, of course. I think certainly financially, lots and lots the government does already. We're an example of a fund which they support. We see tax schemes such as EIS and CDIS, which I think is very good. R&D tax credits. Many of our companies apply for and get R&D tax credits through the government schemes, and tax favourable options through the EMI option scheme. So those are all, I think, very powerful mechanisms, either targeted at the companies themselves or at investors, which the government does and can play and does play a role in supporting. I think beyond financial, we mentioned the entrepreneurial visa scheme, so allowing very talented people to be attracted into the UK and for that to be an easy process. What would be the other key areas? I think the one you always hear and I think is absolutely key is super fast broadband. I mean, it still can be very tricky to get fast broadband, and that just needs to be a basic enabling infrastructure that's there. If it's not there, it's just not going to happen. So I would say probably those are the key areas. I'm sure I can think of more. Generating as the Tech City initiative does, I think promoting to foreign not dignitaries but characters from the investment industry, so bringing in more people from abroad and making them more aware of London. I think those are all good. I think they're peripheral. They need to happen, but they're not kind of core. The core is really just allowing it to happen. Creating the space, creating the environment for the ecosystem to carry on growing.
And looking at 10 years from now, Robert, do you think the UK can compete on an international scale? You see the likes of Brazil, Russia, India, China, they're exploding at the moment, the pace that they're moving at. Where do you see the UK's position 10, 20 years from now?
I mean, those economies are all exploding, but not necessarily in the area of tech.
Mm-hmm.
I think technology is an area which does potentially lend itself to more advanced economies taking a lead in. We've seen that in the US, in Israel, for example. So I think I'd like to see the UK doing much more in technology, particularly digital media being our area, but there's lots of areas of technology. And I think that would be natural for the UK to try and push into those directions, and not try and compete, let's say, against lower cost economies in certain areas of say manufacturing. We should be focusing on the higher end of manufacturing, more sophisticated, more technology advanced, and non-manufacturing service sectors the same. I think that's logical for us. and those are areas there's no reason why we can't compete in.
Robert, it's been a real pleasure.
Thank you.